on with minority coaches and minority hiring at the executive level. But also, I think this move, this initiative puts a lot of pressure on NFL coaches, NFL ownership. This conversation being brought by the league, by Roger Goodell and Troy Vincent, puts a lot of pressure on NFL ownership. And then also, I think people need to understand there are two different proposals here. And I think the genius of this, to me, is the first proposal about giving Roger Goodell some oversight, removing this tampering deal and allowing and not being able to Mickey Mouse around with preventing coaches from interviewing for jobs by giving them bogus titles or whatever. I think that proposal is going to pass, and I think there will be no complaints about it because I also think they're going to potentially be required to interview more than one minority candidate. I think all those things are good. This other initiative will take all the heat and the controversy, probably won't pass, but maybe the more important and substantive stuff will pass without controversy. Marcellus, do you think this proposal to reward, do you think there's some upside to this? Is this a bad look for Roger Goodell or Troy Vincent?
I think ultimately it will be a bad look in the sense of not their intention, but just our reaction, our response, because I think what's going to be glaring is the fact that you're not empowering these coaches, even if you give them a title or opportunity. That would not be an empowering experience for those coaches that land in these positions of this new affirmative action, if we want to call it that. You also can't legislate and incentivize teams that a coach is more valuable in his departure than he is currently on your actual team. Think about this. They're going to give a potential draft choice to a team that allows a coach of a person of color to go to another team. If you look at that beyond the PR land, it actually says that that coach has value leaving. And you can't have a situation, a mechanism in place that gives you that type of value. And as we talked about in the earlier segment, it just really cuts the legs underneath a lot of the coaches who are going to be the beneficiaries of this. So I think ultimately it does land wrong for Roger and Troy.
Yeah, fellas, can we first lay the foundation here of what we're talking about? They're two separate issues. Number one, the league wants to enhance the Rooney Rule, and for that, it does not need a vote of the owners. That is something that simply the league office can impose. And one of the things they're going to do is require now that teams have to interview a minimum of 2 candidates when we're talking about the head coaching position or a general manager position. Also, they're going to apply the Rooney Rule to the coordinator position for the first time ever. So that's separate from these things that we're talking about. Now, in terms of the 2 resolutions that you guys have referred to, the first one would now stop teams from being able to block assistants from interviewing for coordinator positions. Why is that important? Because many owners believe that they want head coaches who have coordinator experience. And by doing this, now you, in theory, will get more minorities into the pipeline with coordinator experience. To the more controversial resolution that you're talking about, look, the bottom line here is that the league is totally frustrated at this point. It has put into place numerous programs to try and address this issue about the lack of diversity at the head coaching and the executive level with teams. And so you go back to 87, I believe it was, when the Bill Walsh internship program started. And that was considered radical in its day, and it helped to increase the exposure that some of these minority coaches could get. And we saw minority coaches getting hired at the head coaching level. And then in 2003, they brought in the Rooney Rule to try and address this further. And there was some initial positive movement out of that. And now things are backtracking, and so they're trying to figure out what to do. Here's the problem. I have talked to at least a minimum a dozen minority coaches about this. Current head coaches, former head coaches, aspiring head coaches, as well as some personnel people, and I get 2 things from them. Number one, they feel it makes the league look bad from the standpoint that the only way owners are willing to consider to hire someone of color is by bribing them with improved draft status. The second thing is, they say, it is an insult to them personally because they will be viewed as someone who simply got their job because of the color of their skin and not the extent of their resume. And so those are two issues right now that these coaches and personnel people are concerned about as we go forward.
Jim, let me ask you a follow-up. There is the more controversial proposal that I tend to think is not going to pass. The other measures that you talked about, one that you said that the NFL can, or two of them you said the NFL can implement on their own, and then something that's up for a vote. Are those steps in the right direction that will significantly or marginally help improve the situation? Are they relatively bold steps or bold improvement?
No, I think they're absolutely the right steps. Anytime you can take an action to stop someone from limiting a person's mobility, to me, that is a positive. And I've spoken with teams that will be hurt by that first proposal, where now you can no longer block assistants from interviewing for coordinator positions. And what some have said to me is that, look, it will hurt us, but it's good for the broader good for these men to have an opportunity to climb that ladder. So from that standpoint, it's a positive. What's interesting about that resolution is that in the language it says now, because as you referred to earlier, people play with titles to circumvent some of the rules. But now the commissioner, if there is a disagreement between two clubs over whether or not it is, as the league says, a bona fide coordinator position, that is where the commissioner can step in, and his ruling would be binding and non-reviewable. So I do believe that that's a positive.
Marcellus, before you jump back in here, I want you to consider this. By the more controversial proposal, I think it has set off a round of conversation that I do think is going to benefit the NFL. I got something in my mailbox from the Yahoo Sports editors where they were like, here's a proposal, solutions that are better than the ones that the NFL is offering up with this initiative. I think to some degree this is calculated by Roger and Troy to put it out there, to put pressure on people, to refocus the conversation and make people dig deep and come up with a solution. I don't think, and this is speculation on my part, I don't think they thought it would pass. I think they thought it would galvanize people to engage in a conversation and provoke some further actions.
I can tell you that's not the case. Yeah, no, I can tell you that's not the case here. Yeah, there's some lobbying going on right now to try and get this passed. The commissioner, as I've been told, is, very supportive of this, and they would like to see this passed. So it wasn't a trial balloon or to generate some sort of energy to get a discussion going. They've been trying to have this discussion for years. I mean, and they have taken steps. You go beyond the Bill Walsh Diversity Fellowship. Then you talk about bringing in African-American coaches or minority coaches to a summit last year on Morehouse's campus, where they were networking, and they wanted to empower these men to try and figure out how to address this. They've talked to owners about this. The one thing I'm hearing from owners right now, what they question is whether or not this is the right time to do it, simply from the standpoint that we're in a pandemic. They don't know how this season is going to play out or if there will even be a season, and they're asking, is this the right time to take this up? Now, the counterpoint to that is it's always the right time to do the right thing, and some feel this discussion needs to be had now.
Yeah, I think that they actually genuinely feel that this is the right step. I think it's going to be met with harsh reaction, but I think that their intentions are known. And look, they saw the wave of the Rooney Rule. There were two black head coaches in 2003, and then they hired Marvin Lewis to make it 3. And they saw the wave, and they saw the spike, and then they also saw it regress and decline to where it is now in the state, where now there's only 4. Think about it. Almost 2 decades later, you're looking at a situation where you really haven't had the tremendous impact that you intended. So they're now going back to another situation, and it's the drawing board, because it's not really just the Rooney Rule Part 2. They're really trying to go and have another invention using the Rooney Rule as a learning experience, because something has to change in their hiring practices. And this is something that even Rooney said. He said, look, We saw the increase, we saw the bump, we saw the positives, and then we also saw the regression. So Roger right now, who's under contract to 2024, is looking at his own legacy, is looking like, I can't have tremendous growth of this game, and everyone didn't grow because of this game. So I think that his heart's in the right place. I just don't know if this is going to be the landing spot.
Jim, I'm not going to push back too hard on your contention that you believe there's 1,000% sincerity in this move, and I tend to agree with that. But I think that they're wise enough to know that this thing's not going to pass. I also think they're wise enough to know that they've sparked a conversation again that we can unpack even more, and would love to have you come back, because I think a lot of times, and I'm sorry we got to end on this note, I think a lot of times we only talk about NFL ownership as it relates to minority coaches, and we never go the cut deeper in terms of there are some other players and influencers here that keep the good old boys network going. And I'm just going to throw this out here today and would love to have you back to circle on, but Jimmy Sexton and Bob Lamont, two powerful agents, represent about a third of the NFL coaches. Jimmy Sexton represents, I believe, 11 of the 14 coaches in the SEC. These guys are major power players as it relates to coaching in football at the NFL and college level, and they have a lot of influence over ownership. They control who gets assistant jobs, head coaching jobs, and until there's a rival for them and the little network that they control, it's going to be hard to really change things. And we can continue to blame NFL ownership, and they certainly bear the brunt of the responsibility. But there's some other players involved in this that also need to be addressed. And again, I think by sparking this conversation, it gives us an opportunity to go a layer deeper and look at some of the underbelly and what else is involved in preventing African-American coaches from moving up, not just at the coaching level, because these guys represent executives too. There's a little cabal of agents, media, that have a lot of influence over who gets head coaches. It's not just NFL ownership. Jim, thank you so much for the time. We'd love to have you back. Jim Trotter from the NFL Network. All right, we got to keep it rolling. We're going to return to Last Dance. Rick Bucher's going to join us. We'll talk some more about Jordan's bully tactics